Today, there's the invitation of turning towards what we call the emotional and thought content in our minds and hearts and bodies. So it's been these different areas of explanation. It's not like it's necessarily progressive, but it can be. And so we started with the invitation to know our bodies, and we keep coming back to that, right? And then Ian offered us a beautiful invitation to connect with pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, the feeling or taste tone of our experience, whether it's with the body and the sense spaces, or whether it's with thoughts or emotions. There's always a feeling tone. And noticing the feeling tone, because it's so important, as it's a platform or a diving board for whether we jump into the unwholesome energies or the wholesome energies. That's one of the key places of intervention that the Buddha talked about, right? So why? Because in the not network or neural framework, but because that's, the Buddha didn't talk about it that way, but in the flow and structure, which we have two of. So in the one that is rooted in misunderstanding and confusion, we've noted that the experience of that is that we don't have a home, that we feel homeless, that we feel insufficient and inadequate, and not belonging and are not fitting in. Like, not fitting in particularly is the description the Buddha offers for this stream or tree or framework or neural network that lives inside of us. The one that is based in the psychological experience of not fitting in. And the simile used is the axle of a wheel not fitting properly. So the wheel can't go anywhere and it keeps spinning, and there's this stress that happens because it doesn't fit. That sense of the stress of feeling as though we don't fit in. And it's deep, isn't it? It's a deep stress or discomfort, dis-ease, or actual suffering. And out of this, it makes so much sense that there comes a response of wanting to anchor ourselves and to find a home, to find a place. And it makes sense that when an experience is pleasant, we would go with a lot of energy and force, depending on how much dis-ease there is in the ground of our being, towards holding on, clutching, clinging, wanting to reproduce the feeling of pleasantness. In fact, sometimes it could even feel like survival. If I don't get this pleasant sensation or what I want, my survival feels at stake. And I remember this time as a teenager when I was living in London. It was winter, and in the early days, London felt like 10 months of it was in winter. It was always rainy and cold and foggy. Now with climate change, it's different. And walking, it's a 15-minute, 20-minute walk from the subway to where I lived. And like feeling miserable already and walking and fixating on having fried eggs for lunch. Like, that's what I fixated on. I love eggs. I still do. I fixated. I got home and one of my sisters had eaten all the eggs. And I burst into tears. It felt like the end of my world. And of course, everyone was like, Arena is so hysterical. Here she is hysterical again. I understand why they might have related to that experience in that way. But really, I did feel as though my world was crumbling. And it was because when we don't include our grief and trauma in our response, then it doesn't make sense. And then you are seen as hysterical. But when you do, and there's that incredible need to find a safe home, and what we're given is something pleasant because no one taught us this, then we become fixated on it as the way to save ourselves. And the opposite is true, that if something is unpleasant, it feels as though our life is being threatened. So I want to acknowledge the depth of this dynamic. And when there's delusion, it's confusion. And that sometimes is the worst feeling, when we're confused and we don't know what's going on and what's happening and what do I do? Like, we've lost any sense of, remember yesterday I said that just coming back to the body and stepping builds the banks to hold all this, or is one of the ways. When we are so confused, we don't remember that, because confusion never has mindfulness and remembering in it. So we've lost the path. You know, I always felt so moved by Thich Nhat Hanh's description of what happened when there was a boat full of Vietnamese refugees after the war, and that Thailand and Cambodia and Taiwan had all refused to receive these refugees. And he was working so hard to get America to accept them. And he worked with the consulate and was doing all the stuff, and the United States government refused. And he talks about this experience, this incredible despair, and that he did walking meditation all night, just step, step, step. That is so amazing to me, to in that remember that there's a path. And confusion is when you don't remember it. And so just naming the incredible suffering when we don't remember there's a path. So that's confusion. So we are acknowledging the depth of why it's difficult to challenge these movements of the mind, and really how much effort and practice it takes to begin to remember that there is another path than moving in grasping to hold on what's pleasant, to hold on to wherever we're successful, to push away any failure that we define as failure rather than as a learning, any imperfection, because in trauma we're always striving for perfection as a refuge. So acknowledging the depth of this dynamic of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, and then the mental energies that arise that masquerade as our savior. And it is pleasant. The pleasant is pleasant. Fried eggs are comforting, you know, and shutting the door on what's unpleasant or controlling. Like, I remember hitting my sister because she wouldn't give me the dress I wanted to wear because I thought I looked beautiful in it. Like, extreme expressions of not wanting the dress I had. So acknowledging these dynamics, all of them rooted in a basic confusion about where our path and liberation and healing are and where our real home is. So all these energies, naming them, and the Buddha names 5 energies in particular that take us away from our real home or our true home and refuge. And they are the 3 I've mentioned, and he also includes anxiety, and that ruffling of the surface of our mind, which doesn't allow us to discern clearly what's going on. So that's part of the very basic expression of ignorance, is agitation and anxiety. And he also names the heaviness he uses sloth and torpor, the ways that sometimes that becomes a defense for us. I'm not saying when he wasn't talking about being tired, but this defended place where the mind and the body are so heavy you can barely move them or think. And then also doubt. Doubt being one of the single most pervasive forces that take us away from the path, because when we doubt it, then we don't return to it. Doubt is not inquiry. It's an incapacity to discern the path. It's the opposite of faith, which is knowing that there is a path. So these are the forces of the mind that obscure and keep in place this dynamic where we are caught over and over again in wanting, not wanting, and feeling lost. Not that we're bad. It's got nothing to do with being bad. It has everything to do with acknowledging that every human being alive is working with these forces and these dynamics. And in the Buddha's enlightenment experience, when he said, my mind has the capacity to know everything that can be known. And he looked into eons, it said more than when we understand humanity first came into being, human beings first came into being. According to the Buddha, there were previous eons, who knows, but he discerned into this. And he said, I cannot find a time where there wasn't delusion and ignorance in the human mind. In all minds, I cannot find a time. So naming that it's part of our heritage. And from this heritage is built the structures and cultures of oppression, this particular structure that lives inside of us. And then what is so magnificent about teachings of liberation, and I include all teachings of liberation, is the naming of a path for this ending. And that's what we're exploring together. So the path for the ending rests in the cultivation of mindfulness particularly, and loving kindness, and all the other beautiful qualities. Those are the leaders of all the other beautiful qualities, including faith. Faith is in that initial grouping. Mindfulness, faith, and loving kindness. And then patience and truthfulness and generosity, compassion, appreciative joy. All of those are brought in by those 3. And those energies are the energies that liberate us. So, in the 3rd foundation, I want to read the quote that for all the ruffles of the paper, where this quote is, and if I can't find it in my notes, then I'll let go of reading it. Okay. Sometimes it's so nice to quote him. Okay, let's see, it's my last. So this is what he says in the third foundation, this foundation and mindfulness, how mindful. He describes how mindfulness works with it. We know consciousness with grasping. We know consciousness without grasping. We know consciousness with a shrunken mind. We know consciousness without a shrunken mind, with a distracted mind. We know it without a distracted mind. We know consciousness is like we know the arising of a developed mind and an undeveloped mind. We know with mindfulness, we know the arising of these energies and we know their passing. We know when they leave and we know both the arising and passing of them. So we know those energies, and then mindfulness in the recognition of knowing a mind that is not distracted. There's the invitation to support the non-distraction. A mind that knows a grasping mind, our mindfulness that knows a grasping mind, it knows that this is a mind that doesn't support our well-being. We feel, it's not intellectual, we feel in our bodies what it's like to want something, that contraction, that being pulled away towards the object, like we're being invited to know it, because this is an embodied practice. It's not just like, oh, the Buddha says I'm saying it, so believe it. It's like, check it out for yourself by being present and noticing the energies that arise and pass away. And here again is the mantra over and over again. If we find ourselves getting caught in something, then we acknowledge it, and then we make sure that we're not identifying with the storyline around it, or with the experience of this is me and mine. This is my failure. This is my imperfection. This is my shrunken mind. Because when we identify with it, it's the platform for building a whole construction of identity around failure, around the wanting for a home, which makes sense, but in the wrong place. So we are dedicated to a freedom that allows for the unique and beautiful and rainbow dewdrop expression of ourselves, unobstructed by the creation of identities in trying to fix something negatively. I'm lousy, I'm a failure, I shouldn't be teaching anymore, I'm going to stop teaching, which I might do, but not for those reasons. And the positive, oh God, I am so good, poor everyone else, I am like so brilliant. So noticing those constructions and how grasping holds onto mental states and builds a construction of identity, the type of identity that doesn't serve us. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah. So let's have a go together as a community. And just take a few moments to get settled in the ways that you like to get settled, that serve you. Just ring the bell as a way to connect with sound. Acknowledging the body or breath or sound. Allowing, giving space to the feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If that's predominant, sometimes it's not so predominant, that's fine. Inviting a relaxation, surrendering our weight into the earth. Acknowledging the mental atmosphere that's present. If there's ease, a collectedness, or agitation, not right or wrong, but just acknowledging reality. If there's joy or grief, the knowing like a field, allowing whatever's there to live and be known without trying to fix or manipulate. There's thinking, the energy with the thoughts, kind or unkind. Just knowing. It might be you can feel these qualities in the body because they also live in the body. open or closed, contracted. Just knowing. If the mind feels wobbly, you can be intentional. May I hold, allow and know these energies as they arise. Knowing those that support us and those that are obstacles, if we identify with them. How is it now? Just before we end, acknowledging again what's present and what's my relationship to it. Thank you. Thanks for being in the room. Thank you for your practice.